Hello, Grand Rising, Divine Rising, blessed be to your day. It's the last day of Mercury retrograde. I was talking about it a little bit in the podcast, and I was talking about the mapping. There's a bonus. If you go to the G.O.D podcast, it's streaming now. We got into that transparent projection or understanding how to move from the space of observational offense or observational defense, and understanding the aspects of the irrational solidarity based on deflection. That means you staying in the spaces, or you form these connections or these attachments rather, and they're based on an irrational aspect, based on an identity. So it's like now, you're coming into this space, and then transitional conflict, and then we have some bonus feature because Spirit was hitting me and was like, yo, tell them how to map their emotions, and you can't run, but you can't hide. So I took what we talked about yesterday, went deeper into it into the podcast, and today being the end of Mercury retrograde, that means everything based in your past has come to the surface. It's time for some assessment. Here's the thing though. It may be feeling heavier. For me, I'm excited as fuck because went through those lessons. I always keep telling y'all, tell my clients, going through these lessons, going through these aspects, the acceptance, because you cannot run. You can't run, and what you're running from, you'll always be running to. The manifestation of the avoidance, the neglect, the rejection, the trust, the abandonment, those aspects, that's where your womb leads you to. So you're never running away from anything. Can't run away from your shadow. It's attached to your feet. You're not Peter Pan. You're not Peter Pan. Can't stay in that cycle forever. You're getting back to that space, but we don't get into that a little deeper. But it's time for the retrospective assessment. And the way that I'm going to start this, I'm going to pull a couple of cards. If you're not in, run it back, and then you'll get that aspect. If you want something deeper, of course, hit me in the inbox. But I want to pull a couple of cards based on the energy and that feeling to that aspect of what you may be feeling during your retrograde, so we can get you where you need to be at. But here's the thing. You can complain about everything that's happened. You can complain that where everything's at. But if you're not willing to invest, and it's one of the things that I had to learn deep down, and my Leo moon aspect of myself had me so proud to be like, nah, I can still keep doing it. But as I keep saying, your intentions, your manifestations, your affirmations, they're all powered by the unseen, the undealt with, the unassessed aspects that are deep down in the jungle deep, that is your subconscious mind. So that's why you keep getting these strange events, and you get the feeling that it's okay, or you get the feeling that it feels good for a short second. And this, when we get deeper on Saturday, we're going to get deeper into the shadow work and understanding urges and addictions, and that wanderlust that we get into on Friday. But you have to understand that you've been here before. You've been at this exact point before. Whether you've been in it exactly the way it is, or you've been in it, we're not talking about exactly the way it is, because a lot of us keep looking at the material or the physical. We're talking about the energy. We're talking about the energy. We're talking about the frequency. We're talking about assessing the energy and the frequency. We're talking about assessing that. It has nothing to do with the physical. The physical is simply the byproduct of that energy. So this is how we have to start understanding, going deeper inside of ourselves. You feeling it. I remember. But it's going from the key of, and this is one of the major keys when it comes to an assessment, you're not going to be getting rid of the anger, the doubt, the insecurity, the jealousy. You're not going to be getting rid of it. What you're going to be able to do is learn how to use it to your benefit. That means whenever you feel that coming up, you're able to assess and go back. you're able to assess and go and find the root to it. That's what you've been doing the entire time, trying to find the root. But you just, ooh, pretty flower, ooh, pretty tree, ooh, pretty this, ooh, pretty colors. And you get stuck in that aspect. So I'm going to pull a couple of cards real quick. Let me get the cards shuffled up. I'm going to pull a couple cards real quick. Pull 5 off top. Up, 1 fell off the top. All right, cool. Let's do this reading, shall we? The first card to be pulled is the 5 of Swords. First card to be pulled is the 5 of Swords. The 5 of Swords represents, in the Hermetic aspect, the Lord of Defeat. So right now you're feeling defeated. But I want you to understand, you're not defeated. It's that identity you've been trying to hold on to. It's that perspective. It's that perception you've been trying to hold on to. It's all of the things that you've been trying to hold on to so you do not have to assess that unseen aspect of yourself. Remember how yesterday I was talking about you can run but you can't hide? You sitting there trying to maze runner, or what's that other one, the fun run shit? Now you're being forced to sit the fuck down with yourself. Second card coming off the top is the King of Cups. Moving forward in those waters. You're feeling like right now that water is getting really, really. At first, you were used to the water because you were used to treading and you were used to like splashing through the water. But now you got to understand, as it gets deeper and deeper into yourself, your emotions get deeper and deeper, the water starts to get murky. You know how that water got murky. You know how that water is choppy. You know, but now it's time for you to sit down and really deal with those aspects. Or all you're going to do is sit there and keep getting stuck in that space. Third card off the top, 2 of Swords. 2 of Swords represents that decision. You already know the results. Here's the thing. It's not the results that you know, it's what you do not know. That's where your fear feeds. Your fear does not feed. Remember we're talking about corresponding with your trauma. Your fear does not feed based on what it already knows. It uses that as the plate to keep scooping up that unknown. So now you're sitting there in that conflicted position, whether it's the job, whether it's the relationships, whether it's the friendships, the old narratives. You're now in this space with yourself where that's that point of conflict. Remember, conflict is necessary for your growth. The way to know if you are actually growing is that transparency we talked about in the podcast, that transparency that's oh so important. In order to move from this space right here, this conflict that's in this 2 of Swords, that balance that's in that 2 of Swords aspect, you're going to have to be really, really transparent with the information that you already know about yourself. What you already know. You know that you have been moving in a certain space with yourself for a long period of time. And what you've been trying to do this entire time is, Grand Rising. What you've been trying to do is avoid the defeat of that identity. You've been trying to avoid the defeat of that identity. You've been trying to avoid the defeat of having to sit down with yourself and talk to your inner child. Now that you're in a position and you know what you know, and now that it's time to apply it, what did you think was going to happen? What did you think was going to happen when you started applying what you knew? That's one of the biggest things when it comes to us doing our work, is applying what we know. Applying what we know in order to unlock our aspects into our truth. One thing for I'll give an example. One thing for myself was being able to sit in a position to allow the anger to come up. Love it, angry right now. Allow the anger to come up. Allow all of it to come to the surface. There's going to be moments right now. I had a couple conversations the other day while I was in between doing the podcast and doing everything else. There's a lot of things going to be coming up, and you're going to literally see it, feel it like you're there. Sit with it. Sit with it. If you're at work or if you're on the move, you got on work, I understand, but I want you to write that down. It's time to do that assessment. That means that feeling that you feel that you cannot deal with at that time, because you understand, you got to go to work, go down the line, you got some stuff, you got things to do, it's understandable. But I want you to write it down. I want you to write it down and put beside it, I will deal with. I will assess this. And now you're setting up that space. Remember, because it's always about setting up that space. When you're able to sit down, pull that up and start assessing it. Because this is how it works. This is how that shit works. If you do not assess it, everything in your space will bring you back to assessing that lesson. That's how the lesson works. That's how the sign works. There's nothing else coming. It's already been there. It's already inputted inside of you right now. That's how the lesson works. You think you're going to run away from the lesson, run away from it? You're going to go into a space where the frequency is going to you're only running into the frequency or the manifestation of your lesson. That's what you're running into. Give you an example. You say that you do not have time to sit down with yourself because you got used to being the helpful person, being helpful. What is the reason behind that aspect of you being that? There's nothing wrong with you being, but you have to understand, just like if you underextend, that means if you sit there and you're stingy with your energy, or you're stingy, or you're shy, you don't want to be outward. It's the same trauma response as being over. Remember, we're coming into balance. Self is in balance. Self is in balance. Self is in center. So if you find yourself undercutting yourself, that means the conversation that you should have, and we got into this on the podcast, you're always coming from a space when you're under when you're away, when you're on this end of the self-care aspect, you're in observational defense. That means when those emotions come to the surface, you're always defending yourself based on those emotions. But when we're over the line, when we're over that line, and we're being overly spoken, we allow others' events or the external aspects to set the tone for why we're doing the things that we're doing. Keeps us stuck in these irrational behaviors. A lot of times when it comes to this work, which leads into that fourth card, we go into that King of Wands, you're burning yourself out. You burning yourself out for what? At the end of that moment, why did you go? Why? At the end of that moment, this is how we learn to cultivate our energy. If at the end of a moment, the end of a day, the end of whatever space wherever I venture out into that moment in that time, if at the end of the day, before I sit down, before I lay down, before I get ready for the next day, there's residue on my plate, that means I need to assess what the fuck I keep stepping in. I'm treading shit into my space. Remember, because as you're walking through your wound, think about the wound, think about an open wound on your arm, and think about you walking through the wound. Let's think about Osmosis Jones. And you walking through that wound. You're treading your blood, you're treading the blood. What's in the blood? Remember, if you have not seen the movie Dracula on Netflix, what's in the blood? Blood is life when you know how to read it. So what are you treading inside of your space? Remember, it's your unseen that treads inside of your space. It's that undealt with that comes inside of your space. It's that it's those events that you have not dealt with that keep creating your space. It's that conversation that you have not had with yourself yet to an aspect of coming into acknowledgement and that acceptance, doing that apology and being able to take yourself into that thankfulness. You can say that you're thankful and you're in gratitude and you're in abundance and you're in prosperity all day. But the first thing that's going to come up at all times are all of the aspects that are supposed to defeat the identity of what you are abundant in. Remember, abundant is a frequency. Abundant is a vibration that shifts between the frequencies. So if I'm in a space with myself, give an example. If I'm in an emotional space where my feelings are based in no one else is going to do more, no one else is going to do it, I have to do it. I got to put myself in that position. That means I become abundant in things in my space needing me for that access. So now my energy is charged by everything needing me in that access. So when it comes to the time, when that, cause this is how that cycle works. When it comes to that time with yourself and you're like, you know, it's time for me to sit down with myself. Once again, using beloved as an example. In that self-care routine for yourself. And now everything seems to be bringing you into that space to force you to sit down. What are you going to do? That leads into the final card. That 3 of Wands. You're holding on to all of this. You're holding on to all of this energy. You're holding on to everything right here. And you're holding out in front of the. Imagine holding the torch for the Olympics. Imagine holding the torch for the Olympics. Visualize that. Where are you running to? What are you about to put your energy into? Is what you're putting your energy into, is it beneficial to the learning process that is for you? This is what I mean by there's a difference between being selfless and selfish. Selfish is to become more. Selfless is to depend on the external bodies, to create your body. That's when we're looking at those identities. You want to be the best employee ever. But in order for you to be the best employee, guess what you need? You need everybody around you to be at a level under you so you can look like you're the best employee. You want to be the best member of the family ever. But in order for you to be the best member of the family, guess what you need inside of your space? You need everybody around you to not deal with the aspect of the family secret, the conversation that need to be had, and anything of that narrative. Just so you can stay in that false sense of balance. Now you at this retrograde point, this peak where you at the end of retrograde, and you sitting there like, but I'm used to. You can't go back. There is no going back. There is no stepping back into what you came from. You're noticing stepping back into what you came from got you more angry. It got you more upset. It got you feeling more insecure. It got you feeling more jealous. It got you feeling all that shit at once. Because it's the end of that cycle. It's always been the end of that cycle. You've always been in the right, correct position. What are you going to do with it now moving forward? Because it's only going to get more murky if you don't deal with it. It's only going to get more chaotic and hectic as long as you keep trying to avoid it. So what are you doing? Some are in their beginning stage of that anger. Some are in the beginning stages of the anger, the sorrow, the pains, and all that shit coming to the surface. And now it's time to address those identities. It's time to address those identities. It's time to address those aspects. It's time to address my level of transparency and how it affects my perception. And that's what we got into this week on the God Hour podcast. We got into that transparent projection. Understanding, moving from a space of the perception-based biases to keep us in a rational solidarity. A rational solidarity is staying in a space similar to, I'll give you an example right now that I didn't give in the podcast. An example of a rational solidarity is everybody lining up talking about we need to get reparations but ain't nobody said or set a price, set a time, or set a date for how much they should be getting. Irrational solidarity is you sitting there in a space and your homegirl keep getting hit upside the head, but the reason that you keep seeing is because you're remembering the memories of your maternal figure going upside your head or your mother's head. So you stay in solidarity based on that. Yeah, I've been through the abuse too, girl. Yeah, man, I've been through the abuse with these bootleg ass women. And you stay in that space based on the irrational solidarity of deflecting from the lesson to be learned. That's irrational solidarity. A lot of us got used to being stuck in that irrational solidarity, points of deflection. But you can't run from your wounds. You're noticing right now, like, I want you to really take this assessment to yourself and look where you go when you are upset. Look where you go when you are feeling sometimes, when you're in your feelings. Look where you go. Do you go to a place to where you know? Do you go to a place to where you know whether it's a person, place, a thing, especially if you come to me? Are you going to a space where somebody's going to sit there with you and only be the reflection, but they're there to give you the lesson? Or do you go to a place where somebody else is avoiding the same shit you avoid? Or not avoiding the same shit, avoiding the same shit or the most equivalent nature of what they're doing. That's irrational solidarity. Going into that transitional conflict. Are you dealing with your conflicts or are you simply transferring them around into different hideout spaces? You get in a relationship, your relationship going good, but you still got the homegirl over here that ain't doing shit with their life. You got the homeboy over here that ain't doing shit with his life. So you transfer your insecurities, your doubts, you transfer. You gotta, yes. Everything that you coming into is gonna be that lesson learned. A lot of times we'll be like, I'm gonna cut everybody off. This is one thing, I'm gonna cut everybody off, fuck everybody. But then you realize that you just bring in the next batch of crabs. Yeah, you bringing in the next batch of, you sitting there. Most of us, when we're inside of this space with our identities and not letting go and not assessing ourselves, it's kind of like being on Deadliest Catch. Most of us are living in this lifestyle based on this Mercury retrograde now going direct. So it's now time to deal with. We're sitting in that space and you're basically on an episode of Deadliest Catch. You're trying to see how much you can get for your emotional output. How much you can get based on the identity and the trauma. It's time to it's time to assess. Because it's only gonna, what, you want to repeat that shit? I'm excited. I'm excited. The store where I get my incense from had dragon blood incense, so I'm on 9,000 Ultra Instinct mastered right now with energy. Because I don't have anything like that's the aspect of that work. But this same energy and equivalent way, when we talk about shifts, this the same shit that you feeling, but you have blockages that are not allowing it to fully expand. It's time to expand. It's time to assess. Stop that transitional conflict, that irrational solidarity. We're all black. Okay. 500 black people sitting in a room, all wanting to protest for a little kid, for an aspect, give you something to think about, for a little kid, but all of them are there all of them see themselves in that space for a different reason. This is the reason why when we try to put things together or make that plan and it goes abrupt, because when you go into that space, it's exposing that shadow that need to be dealt with. You got to accept, you got to accept the presence of what comes into your space because it's going to teach you some shit. Stop kicking it off. Stop moving it away. Stop saying I don't want it to happen. That's what, I talked about it earlier. I'm going to do the next cards. The Lord of the Feet. It's time to take away the last of that identity. Those murky waters that are in the King of Cups. You in this space of that decision that you got to make. Which way you about to go. You sitting there in that space. Oh my God. But I want to burn shit away. This ain't the time to burn shit away. This is the time to see what you're holding on to. It's going to hurt for a little bit, but I promise it's going to get better. That's basically what we got into in this. I might end up going live a little bit later. But I want you to be the fucking best. It's time to take that assessment. There's no more running, because when you're running, just like I said yesterday, what I said in the podcast, you're only running in the wound, and the wound is leading you to the physical manifestation of exactly what you're running away from. So you want to run away from avoidance? I guarantee you're going to run into a space where other individuals are avoiding, or something's in that space that's going to be the physical, the urge, and that's what we're getting into deep into the night on Friday. But I desire you to be the fucking best. It's time for you to really sit with yourself and allow yourself to go into that darkness. Consultations, readings, setting up that shadow work consultation. All my readings are mini consultations. Hit me up in the inbox. Let's build. Exactly. Let me read that last part. Yeah, you'll see your father and brother in the cashier and a coworker until you're able to, no matter what, you're going to keep seeing them over and over and over again. Some of y'all are in relationships, and that unhealed aspect with your father, you keep seeing that aspect in your current relationship. You keep looking for those aspects of the father figure in your relationship. Some of y'all got some issues with your mother that you have not dealt with, so you keep seeing your mother in every relationship. You keep seeing the best parts of your mother in certain parts of a relationship, so you try to hold on to them anyway. And then you keep seeing the worst parts of your mother in other relationships, and you keep them around so you don't have to deal with it. You got to get out of that polarity. But I want you to be the fucking best. I love you. We love us. I'll say.